Button!
I pressed it.
Excellent.
Done.
My house is too hot and full of bugs.
Yeah. Agree with that sentiment. Okay. Welcome back to this week's podcast. Hi, we're here again. And this week, our podcast will be brought to you by K-Beauty and General Sweatiness.
This week, our podcast is also brought to you by Heat and Turfs.
Two of my favorite things. I'm your host, Madison.
I'm your other host, Jesse James.
I think it's time for a spritz again.
Stand by. Station break.
This is an interesting form of ASMR we haven't tried yet, but Jesse and I will be periodically spritzing ourselves so as not to die. I don't know if you realize this yet, but dear listener, but it's very hot. It's stupid hot.
My favorite is I watch a reasonable amount of videos, as a lot of people probably do, and live streams and whatever from California. And I have not seen an unsweaty face from California in some time. It is.
For Californians.
The weather is rowdy, and I don't want to be in it. I went to the store last night to pick up stuff, and the sun was fully down. It was it was need a flash for photography amount of darkness, and it was like 90 degrees still. It was just like hot and dark to a degree that I was not comfortable with. And it was also like I went to work yesterday and came back and just went to sleep until the sun went down. Like I didn't eat lunch or do any of the stuff you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
I think I did eat eventually at like 10:15 or so, just because when it was so hot out, there was no way I was gonna do that.
Yeah, I've been eating dinner at like 10 too, because just the idea of either cooking anything or putting food in my body so that my body does things inside sounds generally bad.
I can actually move you into a snack corner here, and you can see how hot it is. So I had to turn off. We have like a little ground unit, one of the like cheapish air conditioner units you can buy to just like shove a tube in a window and hope that it keeps everything okay. And it helps. Yeah. I had to turn that off like 20 minutes ago or so because it's way too loud to do anything. And I had set this for Snack Corner down here, which is a maple bar and or Long John, depending on your location. Look what has happened to this.
Oh no, it's sweaty.
It's like barely holding on to its own frosting.
You better get on that.
Yeah, that is the kind of angry outdoors that we are dealing with. How? But the taste is still there. Also, before I forget, yeah, baby!
Oh, hello. That's a good shirt. I lagged out for a second and you were frozen, and then the next thing I see is just you like showing. I mean, that shirt. That's a good one.
Ideally, that would be what everybody sees as a freeze frame, and then the post office up in your face.
Yeah, I think that's what we all need to see right now. I have a similar snack problem.
Yeah.
I got chocolate with like marzipan filling. It's one of my
Fuck yeah, you
favorite
did.
things. Yeah, I did. And it's like I've been keeping it in the freezer because that's the only place I can keep it without it being destroyed. But
Mm.
and it's been out for like 5 minutes, but it's already deteriorating. So I'm gonna
Mar-
get on it.
Marzipan might be one of the least appreciated things in the US when it comes to good desserts. Dark chocolate and marzipan
I
is
feel like
important.
mm, I feel like almond-based things in general are pretty underrated. Although I would say almond milk is overrated. Not a
Definitely.
huge fan of almond milk, but marzipan and like almond extract y things
Hmm.
need more attention. I also have a single slice of kiwi left over from a cocktail that I made that is mostly just mashed up kiwis and sake.
That sounds real good. I have a cocktail for myself over here. Uh,
Mmm.
it's mostly Pabst.
That's um that sounds pretty good. And I kind of want to mix our two cocktails together based on your previous sake Pabst combinations.
Uh, Sake is an excellent choice all the time. Pabst is an awful choice all the time, and they do
Mm-hmm.
mix very well.
It balances.
Yeah, it's good to keep it trashy.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
I would
Mm,
normally take my time with this, but I feel like the faster it's out of the way, the better. And I'm very jealous of your kiwi access. I haven't seen kiwis at the store here for a while.
yeah, I don't pay a lot of attention, but I feel like they haven't been around for very long either. So,
I finally
yeah,
saw good mangoes again at our store, and I got two that are about the same size as my head, so that's really exciting for me.
that's some pretty intense mango.
I'll grab one here when I'm finished with this terrible procedure.
Excellent.
So, did you get a chance to look up that thing I asked you about?
Yeah. Um, I don't really know. So the articles that I read were posted like 4 hours ago, so I don't know if
Hmm.
anything else has happened. But and I hadn't heard anything about this before you texted me about it. But I guess Epic Games mm, released a feature like another direct way to pay Epic Games, like another payment method
Right.
on Fortnite or something. And Apple was like, no, don't do that. And so there's a big lawsuit happening, I guess.
So,
So,
the part that is essentially the whole thing. There's like a limitation on the way that you can use currency um, to pay for certain things via Apple,
mhm.
which I don't side with either side, but I also think that Epic as a company has exhibited a lot of the things that are things that I consider shitty about a company. And I think that Apple has done that as well. So I don't know. It's sort of a the two bullies at school are fighting, and I don't really care. Also, the stakes are one company gets more money or the other company gets more money, and I also don't care about that. Uh,
Yeah.
Epic, this fits their whole mold of. So they were doing the free game giveaway thing as like a very like out in front way of opening their store, like what, a year and a half or so ago. Um, so like you would just get a free smaller game, generally speaking, like every like so often from them, where like places like Steam, which was their main competition, would give you like discounts that are pretty ridiculous on stuff, essentially doing the same thing but with a bigger catalog and more potential trash. So because people have been around Steam for so long, they then saw what Epic was doing as like an amazing thing, as opposed to just sort of the same thing with a smaller set of stuff. And then Epic has also done the thing where they basically offered to pay slightly more fair prices for things, and that got them a ton of credit. And I think that's the one thing they did that was like worthwhile. Like getting more money to developers actually does help people. And then there was all the controversy about like Epic deals seemingly didn't allow pre-existing deals to stay like viable, but they would also like give extra money to people for making those deals. So it would do things like it would take people's pre-orders off of Steam, even though they could get a PC version, if they like bought up the rights to a game that was going to release in general, which meant having a Steam version usually and maybe a GOG version. Anyway, there's been a lot of controversy, and most people who are like more in that space and aren't like reactionary tend to say like it doesn't really matter, you're still getting something for the platform you wanted. And for me, my big problem with Epic was that they had an unoptimized store, much like Steam did when it came out, but parts of it were taking a lot of extra toll on people's computers, doing a lot of like data analysis stuff, which of course it is. That's how everybody makes money. Everybody is lying to you online and stealing your data. Like that is sort of par for the course.
Especially if it's free.
Exactly. I think less than I dislike Epic, I dislike the fact that they're coming out in the year they came out and trying to say, we're doing right by you, because they're not. And everybody should at this point realize they're not, because nobody is, except for like good old games, GOG. They're pretty much fine. But like you could find certain practices with companies within that sphere not doing the best thing. But if you want to whittle down what capitalism does that's not great, we'll be back to, you know, eating wheat and hanging out in the woods, which honestly, that should be the baseline that we try to work from and not fuck people over. But everybody seems to think that saying that is crazy. So anyway, that's my piece on it. The current thing, though, is Epic released a event, which was a like minute-long video saying that what Apple is doing is going to turn everything into 1984. And
yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
And it's also a spoof of an old video that I believe Apple made about like
it's
Windows.
A spoof of an old Apple commercial.
Yeah. And that's fine and everything for like spoof's sake, but also I think Epic lost a lot of points for me trying to say that some already planned, because they had this like lawsuit already worked out before any of this happened. Like everything was set up to do this. It's not like they don't understand what they're doing. They broke this set of rules with Apple on purpose. They put out this set up idea on purpose, and now they are moving to see if they can get better deals on purpose while getting more support from people. So taking a corporate strategy and saying, if this doesn't go through, we're in 1984, is maybe the most crass 2020 move I've seen so far, and I would include that in like almost everything of like short of the top of the Republican Party, that is sort of the worst messaging I have seen anywhere. Like it's politics, policing, which is also politics, and then this garbage of like, yeah, well, you know, you live in a police state if you don't let us have a even better take in the industry that we're in for our company that makes a ton of money. It's just when people talk about like a cyberpunk dystopia, a lot of people think that that's a nebulous idea, but this is specifically what that's talking about is corporations just using people and their connected like communication as a tool to push their own stuff and to convince people to fight against each other instead of question anything. Like that's exactly what it is. So like saying that's what it's going to be in essence for like 1984 if you don't do what we want 1984 to be is just so shitty.
Yeah, that did strike me as really odd. I don't think I've ever seen a company like run an ad specifically because they're in a lawsuit just to get like public opinion on their side. It's kind of weird. I mean, I don't really know for sure the demographics of Fortnite, but I would imagine it skews towards like younger people
That's
who
the thing is
don't care.
It's still aimed at kids. Like that is that
Yeah.
whole game space is like not young kids because they have actual newer stuff to play, but like, you know, older kids that want to keep playing their thing. It's very World of Warcraft in that way. There is another example of that that is at least easy to point to, and it's one moment. It's
Misting break.
The other thing that you can point to is the Spider-Man rights. That is the same deal. It's a little different because of who's involved, but that thing between Sony and Disney was Disney saying like, hey, this profitable thing we want control of because that was our arrangement. And then Sony saying, well, we want on the grounds that we are the ones who made this profitable, we want this thing. And they had a whole like game plan on both sides of that as well. But instead of just doing a corporate action between the two and having their lawsuit and seeing what the decision was, they started that big campaign of fans arguing about how Spider-Man was like gonna lose all of its character if it went back to Disney, or Disney was the one who made Spider-Man good by putting it in Avengers and all this stuff and like putting money into it. And that was the whole like same thing of like these two companies are giant companies. One is Disney, so fuck them. Like if anything's, it's kind of like with like Apple. Like I think Disney's worse than Apple, but who knows? Like there's no real metric for that. But something like Disney saying we're gonna like keep this idea of taking Spider-Man back, which as far as I know was actually their like signed agreement, and then Sony saying like we have done stuff with it to make this brand something that's worth keeping the license with us. That's solely a dispute with those companies. Like, are they going to relicense it or not? Bringing in like a bunch of like internet fans to try and like yell at each other is just a tactic to like manipulate people and make it a like, do you want to lose fans and get people polarized against you, or do you want to do what we say as like a company? And that's, I don't know, that never strikes me as something that is okay. That just strikes me as like, right, the dystopian world that everybody talked about is exactly that. But like nobody wants to admit that that's what they're doing, because then they would have to admit that corporate tactics are the problem and not the fact that we have like just properties that people like. I don't know. It's very
I mean, it's very like there's no such thing as bad press either way, because even if things don't go your way, you still get the that like space in people's brains while it's happening. So yeah.
Anyway, that's more of my this is annoying corner. It really doesn't matter that much. I think we should break most of those companies up and make them actually be competitive and have like stakes in the world instead of just getting to like pile up money and fire the weakest people in their company whenever they feel like getting more of it. But let me grab a mango real quick.
Oh, good. I want to see these. I want to see these mangoes. Oh, time to miss. Whoa! I really hope that ends up being our thumbnail. I might just cheat and make it the thumbnail.
Yeah. What do you think of these melons, baby?
I like those very much. Those are great. Those are big.
Also, one thing I will say about they're impressively large. One thing I will say about these two is that if you find good mangoes that aren't like pocked and stuff like that, like they've been sitting around a while, they're very easy to wash with soap. Mangoes and apples are like, because you can even feel when they're clean because the oil comes off very similarly to like skin.
Yeah.
So you can like wash them up very easily. I appreciate that. I also have this, which I'm going to try now.
Ooh.
They sounded good and they were on sale, so I have another flavor for next week. And they're good. They're just like a uniform, like Cheeto almost, but made out of lentil on this one.
That sounds pretty good.
Yeah, it tastes like honestly, it just kind of tastes like slightly tomato-y falafel, so that's fine by me. I also have these tropical Swedish fish. I already tried these, or else it would have been a great thing to try on here, because if you eat one flavor of them, just one fish at a time, very rarely, it kind of just tastes like some kind of vague tropical flavor. The pina colada, actually by itself, is not bad. However, if you eat all four flavors and end it with the pina colada, there is a bizarre, like, they had to have tried these together, but I don't know. Maybe they didn't. The flavors build up, and the pina colada, after you've eaten the other flavors, tastes like so I ended up my roommate got a box of these for each of us, and he tried it that way and then said, I'm not eating any more of these, they're disgusting, and gave me his box. And if you've met my roommate, you know that that's not a thing that happens.
Yeah.
The flavor that
That's
comes
weird.
out of that stuff is like, it's like, I don't know. It's gross, but the only way I could describe it is like somebody else's spit or something. Like it is the weirdest, like it has almost like a hard, grungy flavor to it that should not exist in like a candy. So it's almost like you can have one of these at a time and they're just fine. If you decide to eat very many, you're done. Like that's not going to work out for you. So whatever it is that's going on in there, it seems like it's just a product of them not considering these flavors together at all. So that's a fun snack.
And it's only in that when you eat them in that succession of like the pina colada being last, or is it just after a while you notice it.
All the others are fine with each other. The pina colada, something in its flavoring does not work with the rest in like, it tastes almost like a chemical way. Like when you eat it, it's like, no. Also, it tastes a little bit like you're eating part of a fruit rind that you're not supposed to. Not like that it's just bitter, but that it's like I don't know. It is really weird, and I honestly think people should try doing it for that just to see what I mean, because it's incredibly hard to explain. But it is a flavor that's like, this is not a flavor that you're supposed to eat kind of flavor.
Like, this was not intended for sure.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I
didn't even know they had a tropical Swedish fish.
I didn't either. I've never seen them until this week.
Yeah. I was just considering doing that. So, it's getting too hot.
It's
not. Come on.
I don't own any. I think I might own one tank top somewhere, but like my clothing. I have shorts, so that's good. I'm too hot in like late fall, so having this weather is just fucked up. It also, like, going outside and having it be like super tropical feeling, having it be like not that far under 100 and it's nighttime. Not only is it unpleasant, but it's also bringing in so many bugs that I can barely deal with it. Like I've seen a fair amount of spiders, but we've got like millipedes all over outside. Like every night outside of our door, there are like 8 or 9 millipedes in view on like the concrete that you can just see walking around. And I've found 2 in the house that I've had to take outside now. And those ones seem to be coming in from the crack under the door on the main entrance. So like they're clearly all over the place, and I don't know what we're supposed to do about that living in this apartment, other than just like keep moving them outside. But there's also been, I saw, this was like a couple weeks ago, but I don't think I talked about it. I saw a large-ish beetle that had gotten into the house, and it was in a spot I couldn't reach, but it was walking through spider webs, and a spider that was like very small, like one of those house spiders that if it was on a wall you could see it. Like it has coloration, it's not clear, but it's still like not very big. Like it clearly would only eat like gnats and like smaller bugs. And the beetle was probably like, I don't know, the end of a pinky. Like it was not huge, but like it's a beetle. So like spiders I don't think typically eat beetles. And it was walking through like a bunch of spider web, and this little spider kept coming down, like trying to get it, and it would just keep walking, and it would run away, and then it would keep walking, it would come down and try to get it, and then run away. And I watched that like because I couldn't really like reach anything to like move them outside, and it's in a spot that's like away from everything. But it was very strange watching that like beetle kind of get caught up in a web, and then the spider come down like, hey, and then like run away again. That's nothing I've ever seen. But on the other side, being outside, we have like sort of well, we're by the water, but we have those like hanging metal lights that are like very bright that you kind of find in areas that are like on the beach and stuff like that. Some of those have like not at all exaggerating, have like 10 spiders that have attached webs between the light and the pole because it hangs over. And there are so many bugs in them that it is impossible to like see the web through the bugs. And some of the spiders that I'm seeing that are in those webs are like huge, like for garden spidery types of spiders, they're like an entire thumb of a spider, which is not at all the way you usually see those. It looks like 2 or 3 of those spiders just like sitting very close to each other until it moves.
That's gross. All the like spiders is just gigantic. I don't know why. They just get real fat. Like, at my parents' house, they have a boat slip, and when you go down to the dock, all of the spiders down there, like as big as the tip of your thumb. They just got big booties. It's real gross. I don't like them.
I don't know. I'm a spider appreciator, but I do not want to be next to them ever, really.
Yeah, they're interesting to look at, but I also am really creeped out, like especially at the boat slip. I don't understand. Like the boat slips will be what, I don't know, 8 or 10 feet wide, and there will be webs that span the entire thing. And I'm like, how did you even do that? That's so terrifying. I hope they can't jump that far.
Yeah, I'll pass on all of that. Also, like, walking around outside, I still have to walk, like, on the street because there's just webs everywhere. And it seems like with hotter weather, that's just how it is in places like this until winter, which fucking sucks, because...
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah.
I do remember. I think I actually I drove my car to your place and had parked somewhere like kind of next to a bush, and I was at your house for like a couple of hours or something, and I came back and like 10 different spiders had constructed a bridge between my car and this bush, and I walked into a bunch of them, and it was like one of the most singularly terrifying moments of my life, because you just know that there's spiders on you somewhere, but you don't know where. And walking into a web is probably the worst sensation, in my opinion. One of the worst.
It's way up there. Also, if you have hair that's longer than like an inch, you have experienced that bit of like, oh, I don't know if it's one of my hairs or if there's a web on me at like any given time. So you can't like be completely sure either unless like you move your leg and it sticks or something. And I don't know. I've gotten very good at like keeping my eye on spaces where webs can be built when I'm outside, just to like, if there's any hint of like light or anything, I'm not walking through this area. And since nobody's spending a lot of time outside, nobody's trimming like the overhang of stuff. So there's a lot of spots where like the overhang is now below where my head is. So like I just skip all of that because almost guaranteed there's going to be something living in there at this point.
Yeah, I think that's a smart move. I was not so conscientious that time.
Yeah. Well, you lived in a less woodsy spot, so it doesn't seem like you would have reason to be that aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, actually, even where I was, I would still occasionally get spiders building webs between my car and another car, which was annoying. I don't like that. But
lately, they've been building webs between like the roof of vans and trees and stuff because people are staying inside and stuff isn't moving around as much. It's like that effect when you go to a trail and they've like stopped upkeep on it for a little while and those trails are nightmares because you forget how, like, people being there every couple days to, like, set stuff the way that it needs to be makes a huge difference. Like, the rate at which trails are eaten back by, like, the woods around them is, like, almost instantaneous without people being there to, like, keep it set the way it is.
Yeah. Nature is healing. Is what we're trying to say.
Nature is just as rough and unforgiving as it always is. That's like if like my roommate cycles in and out of this apartment, but I don't. And I think if we were both gone for 2 weeks at a time, this apartment would just be spider webs inside, because without movement, it wouldn't stay clean. What's going on over
just
there?
see me get so scared by someone knocking on my door. I think I got a package. That scared me. I can get it later. It's not a big deal.
I've been watching I'll Be Gone in the Dark, so all of that stuff seems like a nightmare.
Oh no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Understandable. Yeah, nature's kind of being a bitch right now. Speaking of, I was gonna say it was in the news this morning, or I guess yesterday, that Death Valley may have recorded one of the Earth's hottest temperatures yesterday, which was 130 degrees Fahrenheit.
I don't want
Which
any of
is
that.
straight dumb.
Yeah, that's like, people are easily dead at like 110. Like 130 just seems like unnecessary cruelty. And it's also because of how fucking stupid everybody in our country is, especially since we have such a high level of production. It's probably just going to get worse. Like, what we have, the next president, I mean, it's either going to be our terrible gremlin that we have right now that's going to try to ruin the world because who cares? Or it's going to be a... I don't know, how would you even describe Biden other than, like, somebody who wants to, like, ride their legacy and be appreciated? Like, that seems to be his only thing. So, like, there's a mild chance we might get environmental protections back that we lost while Trump was in office, but I sincerely doubt we're going to have any sort of, like, substantive changes in that 4 years.
Meaningful.
And that leaves us with, what, like 3 years or something to the point of no return that scientists are, like, pointing to on, like, global warming and stuff.
Yeah.
Which is,
so.
For people who don't know, the point of no return they talked about is what I wish I could remember exactly what year they said this. I wanted to say it was like 2017 when they said we had 12 years. What, it was 10 or 12 years where the degradation of, like, the sort of protection barrier that our environment has, of, like, sort of a combination of everything, of, like, forests, and I'm sure ozone layer plays into it, ocean cleanliness, like salinity on certain things, all of that stuff, taking the data into account. If we lower emissions, and it was like lower emissions by, like, I want to say it was like 75% or some shit. I think it was 50% to get below where we needed to be to, like, keep things stable enough to have a plan in place to get it to, like, 75% lower than what we have in a longer time frame.
Right.
But if we didn't, and it kept going at the rate it was going, which it has been, then we were going to hit a point in like the mid 2020s or like the early 2030s where there was no ability for us with current technology to actually pull things back, and we would just have to let the Earth do its like thing. The Earth doing its thing being taking us back into a incredibly drought-based like weather system, and a system that has like tornadoes stretching not through Tornado Alley, but through like most of the U.S. A system where like our water would rise and we would have to like relocate, which doesn't sound like a huge problem until you realize that like green belts that we keep all of our food production on are basically what would be underwater. So like,
Yeah.
it's basically a, hey, do you want to restructure a little bit so that we can be conscientious? Or do you want to have the entirety of human existence have to completely change everything they do without any option on any of the other stuff? It's essentially the same dilemma we have with like rich people in the US, where it's, do you want to work with us now, or in 10 years do you want us to murder you all because we have to? And that's sort of the place we're getting to, where it's like rich people are still talking about the bunkers they're building instead of just even giving part of their wealth back into not even people, but like efforts to keep the community from completely imploding that gives them money in the first place. It just seems like psychopathic that anybody, let alone all of the rich people, would be on board with not doing that. But again, that's just in case you didn't already know what that is, and that seems unlikely at this point.
Yeah.
What, that's rant number 2 or 3 for today?
Yeah, I might be a little light on the ranting today just because the heat is making me just like tired. But what was I gonna say? Oh, the like point of no return that they're talking about also. I mean the fact that we haven't done anything is why in the Green New Deal they're talking about completely cutting emissions, like we don't have another option. But the point of no return that they're talking about, or like the I don't know, is that what you said earlier? Is that where you were calling it, point of no return? Whatever. Anyway,
that's what I've heard it referred to as. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, whatever that signifies doesn't just signify like old natural disaster. I mean, of course it does, but of course there's going to be people before that who are going to be like totally displaced, and like there's going to be a bunch of fires and shit. Like, of course, a bunch of poor people are just going to be displaced and die before that even happens. And the fact that it's really, really fucking hot right now is making me just, I dread the next few years as we, I don't know, fight to even get people to take this shit seriously. I mean, and this is not even like that bad. It's just really hot and I'm uncomfortable and I have no air conditioning. But I mean, imagine when there's like more hurricanes and more wildfires, and it's gonna suck. So hopefully Biden and the people around him listen.
Hopefully they are there to listen too. I don't have a lot of doubt in the idea that Biden would get elected president at this point. But what I do have doubt in is that our system doesn't just completely shit itself trying to like just continue throughout the end of this year, because like that's truly the scary thing at this point, is that the people that are running our administration have done such a bad job at everything except finding ways to suppress people, that there truly is like a bigger danger of them just basically declaring themselves in control instead of trying to deal with the rest. And then, like, you know, our country's not so fragile that we would be completely complacent in that. I think that most people realize that they can have a lot of police and a lot of military. There's people who are going to be desperate enough at that point that it's extremely dangerous to do that kind of thing. But I don't know that our current president is. I think that he's very savvy at being a bad business person. Like if he were
Good at
in
failing upwards.
yeah, well, and if he were part of Epic or Apple or Disney or Sony, I think that he would be very in favor of the type of stuff they're doing and probably pushing it harder. And I think we need to keep that kind of corporate mentality in mind in thinking about what he's doing, because that's exactly the like, well, I don't want to have to deal with this structure that, like, to him, something like the post office is a competitive thing. They're trying to allow people to work in a way that won't benefit him, so he's trying to crush it. Like, that is just corporate action. That's why people can do stuff like that and just not care that that in itself will probably kill thousands of people if we destroy the post office. Like, that's the same thing with like this COVID stuff where like he knows he's okay because if he gets sick, he's going to have the best possible care. But if other people get sick, well, that's not really his problem. They were probably poor, which means they probably don't support him anyway. And cities are going to have higher rates. So like, who cares? Like, that's the kind of logic we have to remember with transitioning power as well, because like of course he's gonna try and like say that the people who are taking power from him are somehow incapable of it, because that's how a corporate strategist would do it, and that's all he is, which
also a dictator.
Yeah, well, that is the secret of corporatism, is that all corporations are essentially tiny dictatorships in which they are trying to crush everyone around them. But because of our fucking Coca-Cola polar bear commercials, people don't see it that way. They're like, oh, it's great, I love it. Instead of being
so
like, oh yeah, everything sucks. Yeah. It's frustrating, and the jackasses who are like, well, I really support like, not the people who are like, we need to elect Biden to protect ourselves. I get that. It's the people who are like, oh, finally, we can change to something that's reasonable again, is that thing of like, it's still the same set of logic. Like, they are essentially playing the Sony role in the Sony versus Disney, where they're like, but people like what we're doing. They like us, while at the same time killing off projects that people actually want, because the money isn't going to be good enough for them. Like, that's the real like way that our business country works, which we have to change, because business country is going to end up sinking the whole world, and that's not great. I don't want to have to say that people are going to need to take down America from the outside, because that is terrifying. But if we take this time and don't do anything for the protection of mankind, that's going to eventually be where we get to, which I never thought that the idea of a Hitler wouldn't be a future where white supremacy was the problem, because that's just here, and it has been for like 100 years. Well, since our beginning, but like in effect since World War II, as like what the Nazi presence was. And again, we've talked about it before, but like we inspired the Nazis to nearly everything they did. So like we may not be directly responsible, but we sure as fuck helped. And the idea of having like environmental Nazis that are trying to specifically destroy everything for the gains of the money it brings in is just as dangerous, if not more dangerous, on like a global scale. So eventually we have to do something, because it's going to turn into another giant world issue that takes violence to fix, and that is not where I want to be.
Yeah. I think that's been my main or the thing that I keep coming back to when I've been thinking about like how to vote.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a lot. Of course, I don't like Biden at all, and there are probably a
But you
lot
love
of.
Kamala, right?
Oh yeah. I was gonna ask you, did we even mention that last week? Or what had that even happened last week? Had that happened by then? I don't know if it had.
I feel like it happened like the night after, or the night we had finished. I think that got announced or some
Oh,
shit.
okay.
I don't remember
Yeah.
exactly. Let me check my
Yeah.
notes. No,
I don't
no,
remember I don't remember talking about it.
my notes would say Kamala on them, and they don't. They say Harry Potter 1 and 2. So, oh, which reminds me, I should add Harry Potter 3, 4, 5, 6 on this.
Oh yeah, unfortunately I didn't have the chance to do any more Twilight research this
So
week.
I am gonna have to wrap up Harry Potter next week, so you still have plenty of time if you want to do more.
Okay, I probably will. I've been um very deep into that K-drama that I started watching. I think I mentioned it last time. I think I've about finished it.
What's the name
So,
again?
I think the Korean title translates to like Psycho, but it's okay. But the English title is It's Okay to Not Be Okay, and it's on Netflix.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, I enjoy a good K drama, so that sounds pleasant.
I haven't watched any K drama before, and I really liked it, and I think I'm going to start watching almost nothing but just because I'm really tired of everything that I have been watching, and I need something new. And they're just, at least the ones that I've seen so far, are so much lighter than like other things that are available. But I still really
Yeah.
enjoyed the drama. There's a lot of staring in the one that I'm about to wrap up, which I
Uh-huh.
enjoy. Um, the it's okay to not be okay is like um I want to say kind of like a fairy tale modern day sort of thing. Like
Okay. Is there like a supernatural element to it?
no supernatural element to it. It's just kind of they have like a recurring theme of like storybooks and fairy tales because the characters are um uh a girl whose family is really rich because her mom was a children's book author or like a fairy tale author, and she made like a ton of money, and so that girl grew up in this like really huge mansion basically, and kind of like her parents kind of regarded her as like a princess, so she kind of always grew up like with that mindset of I'm a princess. And then she grows up to be also a children's book writer.
Okay.
But so it's like it kind of like centers around her, but it's a love story. So yeah,
So
yeah, but
so this is a non-seasonal Christmas movie, is what I'm hearing.
kind of, yeah, but it's definitely better than Christmas Prince.
I mean, yeah, Christmas Prince is fucking terrible, all three of them, but refer
Yeah.
to our old episodes if you want to know more about that. This is our 40th episode, so you're going to have to travel back a ways to find that one.
Oh, yes. Wow, we're just plowing through them. Wow. Wow.
Fame and money comes a rolling in, baby.
Yay!
Oh, speaking of fame
Yay!
and money, oh, my posh lifestyle.
Oh, oh.
uh,
so luxurious. What was I gonna say? I forgot. Oh, but so my favorite part, the thing I enjoy the most about It's Okay to Not Be Okay is the costuming. The main girl is like, she's the girl that's kind of like the princess. She is kind of a psychopath. Like her mom was also a psychopath, so she kind of grew up like that. But uh, the story kind of details her like kind of through this love interest learning more humanity sort of thing. But she is really rich, and so she's always wearing these like ridiculous designery outfits that are not always, they're not like super outlandish, but they're just like very pleasing. She does a lot of kind of monochromatic head to toe kind of things. It's really good. Yeah. And I also have been really into, just because I'm watching that, and since I do so much staring in this show and a lot of like really close ups on the face, I've been really excited about K-beauty and like learning how to do it. I think it's really cool because it's so it's very subtle. Like there's a lot to it, but I think a lot of what I'm seeing so far is just like kind of doing more with less, whereas over here our makeup is just like different. But yeah,
I don't know. I've definitely seen a lot of understated looks through like Korean beauty stuff, but I feel like their overstated looks almost just take that same set of elements and like keep going, where a lot of other places just jump straight to like I don't know, like the shrinkle style stuff, where it's just like now your face is a candy shop kind of thing. You don't see as much of that out of Korea, I don't think.
I haven't seen a lot of I haven't seen a lot of K-beauty outside of, I think, just the kind of style that I'm thinking of, like the more subtle. And that's kind of what works for that character in particular, because she's just kind of this sort of a socialite sort of lady. So she's very like that. But I'd be curious to see what their more expressive looks are like too.
Yeah. I've seen some Korean takes on American movies that definitely have a slightly more American looking like beauty regimen, I guess. Like the costuming and stuff. But I think it's a Korean version of Ghost, like the movie with Patrick Swayze with the making a pot sitting behind the lady. And the version of Ghost from Korea has like, I want to say the roles are maybe reversed. Like the lady is the ghost in that one, but I think she dies by having like a very light fall off of a moped, which is a very funny way to die. Of just like she's just kind of, and then she's dead. And I don't know. I find that kind of like translation of a movie very funny. But I think that had a more American look to it, other than the locations, which definitely looked more like a Korean street as opposed to an American street. But if you can find, I mean, my recommendation for Korean stuff's always going to include coffee prints, but if you can find redone versions of American movies, they're fantastic, especially if you know the source material, because they're always weird. They're like they hold on to parts of the movie that make it not make very much sense, and then they change parts that are like that seems unnecessary, and it's always good.
I'll have to look for some of those, because that sounds really entertaining.
So you don't have HBO access over there, right?
No, I don't.
We do. There was a big lull after what the fuck's that show that everybody the Song of Ice and Fire series.
I don't know.
That fantasy show that everybody fucking loves, that has Daenerys and the Targaryens and all that kind of stuff in it.
Oh, Game of Thrones.
Yes. I only ever read the first book, so like many series, I've only read the first book, and I really just don't give a shit because they cut out the parts that I thought were the coolest and they left in all the stuff that is sometimes interesting, but that show was not especially good. But
You don't
there was a
like
big
dragons
lull.
and incest?
I'll take it or leave it. I would rather play a video game with dragons and incest than a show where there's no decision making. Because like you can play a game that is just as well or better produced, like a Dragon Age style thing, and get like much more out of it. And you can play through the story in different ways to like see what might happen. Uh, the Game of Thrones stuff is just not really my thing. I thought they had some moments in it, but I skipped most. I watched the last episode, but I skipped like uh, most of the last two seasons, and like I only saw it at like other people's houses for most of the rest of it. Anyway, the point is, we do have HBO. My roommates had it since I've lived with them. And now they have a show that I think should be getting a more Game of Thrones level of audience that I am kind of afraid won't do well, but who knows? I have no idea. Because I think Watchmen did well, and I don't know a single person who watches Watchmen in like my personal life. And last night they started up a show called Lovecraft Country that I think suffers a bit because its title sounds like a documentary or something to me. But it seems like it's a 1950s or 60s maybe take on like I think it starts in a black neighborhood in Chicago, and it has like a almost entirely black cast, and it's them traveling into an area of the South, and it's very like upfront with all of its like here's the racism of the time. Like one of the events in the very first episode is they get chased out of a town by the it's like the police and the fire department riding in a truck together shooting at them, and they it minor spoilers, but the way that it is written like a mystery, but a mystery in the style of like a Lovecraft-esque like supernatural mystery. So there's like weird shit happening, and there's like monsters and shit eventually, but they stop at this like black friendly diner in a town that is not seemingly very friendly, and there's a really well constructed tense scene where they show up at this diner and the one other patron who's there leaves, and the guy who works there like goes in the back to get their stuff, and he's just kind of gone for a minute, and one of them stumbles on him like whispering into a phone in the back, and like comes back out, and the other two characters that are in this part of the story at least are talking about like so they found this diner that is notably, they have like a map that is like places that are friendly, and one of them notices that the interior of the diner seems very different from the exterior, but it's still the red brick diner that they were looking for, and they relate it to like why the White House was white, and it has to do with when it was burned down. And then one of them pushes a floorboard over, and it's all burnt underneath. And then the other character comes running from the back, and they have like this. Basically, we have to get the fuck out of this town chase scene where she's overheard enough to know that there are people coming for them right then. And that scene is so well constructed and like paced, and like all the dialogue is really well written. And I hope a lot of people watch this show because it seems like it is both good, really outlandish science fiction mixed with like really grounded other aspects, like the racism and just like life from that time, and a lot of stuff being like woven in well. It's also very well produced. Like it is it's computer work, and it's like shots and stuff like that are much better than what I remember being in any of the Game of Thrones stuff I watched. So hopefully it catches on. And I mean, it came out last night, so it could catch on still, even if it didn't. But or it could be very successful. I have no idea. But I think it's really good, and it's yeah.
You said it was called Lovecraft Country?
Yeah. It also has a really awesome soundtrack. It's like a mixture of like music of the close to the time, at least. It has like a few Al Green tracks, I think, as long as I'm not completely mixing up who does that music in the episode that I watched. And then it also has some like really good like bassy, almost like I don't know if I'd call it trip hop, but it's very well set to its like sort of creepy undertone vibe that the whole show has. And it's got a lot of art in it. It has a lot of like people's drawings, and like just the work that's done for the scene material of like they have a map that is literally like somebody went through and drew like creatures and stuff over the different towns that are like problematic and stuff. And the town they're going to has like this big stylized like Grim Reaper with a clock over it and stuff. And it's just very well done. Like you can tell people put a lot of work into what it is. I'm curious how many episodes it's going to be. It might be like an 8-episode kind of series from the feel I'm getting, but it's good. It's hour-long episodes, it looks like. So it's one of those shows. But that's if you like creepy stuff, especially like it feels more authentic to a Lovecraft story in a lot of ways than most Lovecraft-based material, because they are actually doing the part where like somebody hears about something weird and somebody's missing. So it's that mystery story that a lot of the most famous like Lovecraft stories use. But in that setting, like Lovecraft, I think there's a the story starts off with him on like a community bus reading The Princess of Mars. There's another reference to like I can't remember the book now. There's another book that is exactly in that, like they're setting tone for people who know these stories really well, of like the main character, instead of being obsessed with like tomes or like ancient like writings or something, which is a trope in Lovecraft stories, he is obsessed with Lovecraft stories themselves and stories like them. And like that is also a really interesting like mythos to build of like with Lovecraft, he has like the Yellow King as this book that is sort of used in other media as well, but like that was the basis for True Detective. The first season of that was this imaginary Lovecraft book, and the way that they're using that kind of material in this is the way that Lovecraft in his stories used books like the Necronomicon, almost of like, well, everybody kind of assumes it's fake unless they know more than you know and they actually see that it isn't, and it's very dangerous material and that type of stuff. And I like that direction that they're heading in as well. And it's got some like effective and sort of even just campy like sci-fi stuff in it, and the way they mix that in works really well as well. Yeah, I would suggest it, though. It's definitely up there on my list of, like, actually good shows. On the other end of my list is, not completely, I'm enjoying it, but I watched the middle 4 Harry Potter movies this week because it was too hot.
Oh, boy.
It was too fucking hot, and, yeah, good point.
Yeah.
It was too hot.
Much.
And movies are a thing you can do when all the lights are off, and you just want to like hide in the dark from the heat that's trying to get you. So I'm glad I didn't watch hardly anything during this quarantine, because having an unlimited number of movies and television has been very nice this last couple weeks. And so the middle Harry Potter movies, have you seen any of those?
Probably not. I don't think I have. I know that I've seen one and like maybe 2, but it was in high school, so I don't really remember.
The first Harry Potter movie I still think is really well constructed as a movie, and I think I've heard that so I've only ever read the first Harry Potter book, and it's fine, but I think I have heard people say that the first one, because it's pretty close to the book, is the closest to the book. And starting in like the third or fourth one, it starts to like differentiate in terms of scenes they decide to use and stuff like that, which seems fine. I like some of the more, well, actually, correction. I liked more some of the complex side characters, as far as you can say they're complex, prior to J.K. Rowling being sort of an out turf, which I'll talk about here in a few minutes. But one of the ones that I have only heard from other people, but like I just watched the movie this week where the movie version comes in. There's a character who's like a reporter named Rita Skeeter, who's just sort of like, yeah, names in Harry Potter are a fucking mess. So, I mean, if my name was Rita Skeeter, I'd be into it too. But her character in the movie is just a reporter who is sort of following, I think it's during the Wizard tournament, so it's in the 4th movie. She's just kind of following people around and being a conflicted source of like not misinformation, but she's like reporting on things in ways that are sort of like disingenuous or extraordinary or whatever. So like in the movie, that's represented by her like taking a picture of Harry Potter and Hermione hugging and trying to spin it as like they're in love kind of stuff. Like, you know, YT movie type of stuff. I guess YT has other meanings now, but let's say YA novel versions of storylines. So there's that kind of stuff, but apparently in the book, which I have not read, that for Rita Skeeter. She is sort of intended to be a trans character, and in going back and reading that stuff, apparently she is described as like having a awkwardly low voice, having big hands, seeming like not quite right, like all of that kind of stuff. And that's the least surprising thing in the world, that is in there after J.K. Rowling's later progression. And then I always liked Cho Chang because I thought that she's sort of like a cheerleader type character who becomes a like freedom fighter with a lot of the rest of the like main cast. And then there's like a brief romantic thing with her and Harry Potter. In learning more about the way the character's written, and also learning. So I have gone through a lot of my knowledge of Harry Potter, even though I did help win Harry Potter trivia in the past. For some reason, I have always had it in my head that her name was Cho Chen instead of Cho Chang. And Cho Chang is a really weird call because it's not exactly a translation, but it's a translation the way that white people do stuff, where if you push those names together, it means like sad or like something along those lines. And like Chinese, I'm not great at Chinese. The point is, her whole character arc in her being a character and not her being a part of this like student movement is that she's sad, and that makes people upset, and that is it. And it sucks that this one character that I thought was kind of cool, but I didn't get why they didn't get like a fair shake in like the storyline, because like, to be real, I think that most of the relationships in Harry Potter are kind of gross, where it's like the main character just marries his like one of his two best friends' younger sister, which is like, I mean, fine, I guess, but like that's a weird like I don't know. It's not a bad message exactly. It's just a weird like, it feels like an easy way out in a way, and then the main character's two best friends literally just get together, even though that actually seems like a terrible pairing. The character that sort of moves the main character, which is Cho Chang, moves the main character towards like wanting to be more accomplished and having like more composure almost between like books 3 and 5. That character is literally just a character that he idolizes now that I have seen more of the story and read more about that stuff. And then when the first major death of that story happens, or I think it's the first, which is the guy that she goes on like a date with instead of Harry Potter, she's just so sad about it for the rest of the series that it becomes like her entire character. And then having her name literally be like a weird white person translation of sad is like super lazy and shitty. Like, I get like a lot of people do that with their writing, but it just like, I mean, Bella in Twilight is similar, like having what it's like pretty or whatever, like having somebody like that in your story is par for the course in a young adult novel, but it sucks. Like, I don't think it's good writing. Like, people should have more respect for children's like thought process than to just be that lazy about it. Anyway, that's just a character gripe I have. The movies are fine. Movie 3 through 6 are weird. Every movie does feel quite a bit different from the last. And I would say in movie 5, they definitely just start having it be like a nonstop shit show for like the events that happen. But there's a lot of stuff that does kind of not stuff that's really worth talking about, but like tonally, there's a lot of stuff that you can even see the movies trying to correct a bit of like somebody who is very feminist but traditionalist trying to make a story for children, which is interesting to me. A lot of like, look, you got to respect your elders. Your elders know what's up, but then having it also be like, but once you act like somebody who's in the generation above you, that's when you're actually getting smart, which is like, that's not great. Like, that's never actually been the case. It's always been once you realize how the world works, then you start acting more like on a single path, which that does happen, but that's not the same thing as like just acting like emulating the generation above you. Like that's actually sort of a weird like let's just stay stagnant, and it really does feel like a conservative view of like how to move forward, written through the lens of a novel about magical wizards and shit. But yeah, I would still suggest people watch it. I'm mostly watching it this quickly because it's one, something to watch, and the TV makes less heat than most things in this apartment. But also, it's being taken back off of HBO in like what it's the 17th, so like 7 days, I think it's all taken off again. And the last time it was on HBO, I watched the third movie and I was like, I'm finally going to see these movies because I haven't seen like the whole last half really. And I watched the third movie because I've seen the first two a few times. And I went back to watch it the next day and it had all been taken off. So I'm not going to let that happen this time. I want to just put the nail in the Harry Potter coffin so I can fucking forget about that shit. But
you need to free yourself.
the sooner I have heard the whole version of the story from this, the sooner I can just pretend like none of it happened and enjoy those characters as my own idea of what those characters would be.
Yeah.
And that's way more interesting to me.
That seems like a good way to go with that franchise in particular at this point.
There's a lot of slavery in that series that people pass over.
Is there really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, they literally have a stand-in in the elves. The elves are like the do you know who Dobby is? He's like an annoying.
Oh right, yeah.
So not only that, but like a lot of the short people who get shit on are half elves. Like they're mixed blood people. Like they have, I think it's Flitwick, the small conductor. That guy, I think that's Warwick Davis actually, which is awesome. But that guy is half elf, I think, and that wasn't such a huge plot point until like the later books, apparently, when they tell you that all of the food and things that happen in Hogwarts are actually half elves doing it. So like I think that was a response to people talking about like, well, if there's still problems in the world and you're having this fantasy world where people can just apparate food out of nothing, why is there turbulence in this world? Why are the wizards just ignoring the rest of the world and letting people die? And instead of like saying, it's a kid's book, like a good, shitty conservative, J.K. Rowling instead said, well, they have elves that do that. Like it just looks like it's appearing out of nowhere because they're moving it up to the thing. And it turned into a thing where she could have just passed it off as like, who cares? It's a book. Instead, she further defined an entire other race of creatures that is literally in bondage, and Dumbledore and all these like good people have tons of slaves, and that's how shit gets done, which is like not great. Uh,
Oh
and
no,
I
that's
want to say
worse.
Harry Potter has a slave by the end of the story, and uh, like I don't. It's even weird because one of the plot points with Dobby's character, who I will never like, but that character gets handed a piece of clothing by one of the antagonists because Harry tricked him into handing it to him, and by giving him clothing, he's freed. So like, there's even
Mm-hmm.
this impetus put in of like they want to be free and they're enslaved, and there are people who are half them, so clearly they are a part of society and more than just like being some like weird side creature because people are fucking them. uh, so like maybe that has a lot of implications for the way that the author thinks, because she's not saying it like it's a bad thing, she's saying it like it's just a thing. uh, so that whole section of that story needs more examination by people. But also, I think that I don't want to wait too long on it, but I think explaining to people who maybe don't know what turfs are is important. But do you have
Oh
another
yeah.
topic so that we can break up the rowling garbage a little bit?
Mm, oh, I guess there was one other thing that was kind of interesting, um, that's been happening in the beauty community.
Okay.
So are you familiar with the Glossier brand?
I'm familiar, but only by name. I don't know anything about it.
They're kind of like the trendy, like Instagram sort of brand. Like I don't know. I don't want to. I guess I'd give them credit for. They have a really good like uh brand uh awareness. They're really good at marketing. Like they do these flagship stores everywhere that are very like kind of immersive and cool. Like they're really good at marketing. Basically, is what I'm trying to
Okay.
say.
I'll
Um,
say as much as I like beauty products as like a thing, I really only have a working knowledge of like beauty products that are frequented by drag. So uh,
mm,
those are the names that
yeah.
I'm aware of.
Well, yeah, Glossier is for the most part probably not going to be one of those brands. They're because their entire like ethos as a company is like we not like they wouldn't say it like this, but it's like we make makeup for the people who don't really want to wear makeup. It's kind of like the makeup for the cool girl who doesn't really kind of wants like a low effort routine, like you're done in
Okay.
15 minutes, sort of like no makeup sort of thing. They're
So it's
kind of, I think,
online
yeah,
like teen beauty store sort of appeal.
kind of. It's starting to be a little more broad than that, but I think that's kind of how they sort of started out.
Okay.
And now they're kind of starting to play around in more like artistic makeup products. They have a line called Glossier Play, which is like more more interesting colors and uh, stuff that allows for a little bit more creativity than their regular line.
Yeah.
Because their regular line is pretty like um, it's somewhat inclusive. I think they have a fair amount of shades of like skin products, but it's definitely not like I would not really expect to be seeing like drag queens use it because their products also are not very high coverage. Like there's not a whole lot of
Okay.
payoff and a lot of their stuff. So I personally do really like a lot of their products, and I do use them in a lot of my like everyday makeup. Not as much when I'm doing anything kind of creative, but so long story short, a few days ago, a bunch of people who used to work in their physical locations, I guess they just laid off a bunch of people a few days ago.
Okay.
But those people, or some of them, uh, came together and created another Instagram account and basically laid out a bunch of like, I don't want to say grievances, but they basically addressed a bunch of issues that those, they call them like beauty editors in the stores, had encountered. Like there was a lot of problems with the managers not really knowing how to address their employees facing like racism and
So,
like,
Glossier is getting bon appetited, or is that sort of the
I don't know,
feeling?
probably. I don't know
Okay.
what that's from. Um,
Uh,
but
bon
yeah, they're
appetit is
basically kind
a
of getting
channel.
like exposed. Okay. Then yeah, it's probably similar. A bunch of people just came out and basically said there's no recourse for a lot of these problems. You promised us that there would be potential for growth, but we're noticing specifically with like Black, indigenous people of color are not getting those opportunities, and uh, it's like pretty long and it goes
Mm-hmm.
on, and it's obviously more articulate than I can say here, but they released a list of demands for
Yeah.
Glossier, and like it's pretty cool actually to just the way that it's articulated is really interesting. It's really interesting to hear from their perspective, because Glossier's whole brand is very like, their whole appeal is they kind of do like the whole empowerment thing. A lot of
Uh-huh.
their branding features like people of color. They're pretty inclusive when it comes to marketing. But there was a lot of stuff that the person behind this account or people mentioned had happened. Like they were recounting some experiences from the beauty editor's point of view. Like there was a couple of different ones that were pointed out that were interesting. Like I guess there was one situation where this woman was working in one of the stores, and there was like a bunch of teenagers who would always come in close to closing time, like white teenagers, and they would always like, go in and try on the darker skin tone stuff, like pretty much in
Okay.
it, like doing blackface just to irritate them. And that happened. People were getting like misgendered, and basically one of the main complaints was just that the managers didn't really do anything about it. But I would encourage people to go read it because it's interesting. But Glossier actually responded to it, and I don't know
They
so far
responded
what they've.
well. They did a great job.
Yeah, yeah, no. it it's they didn't really address a lot of the demands that the people had made. They're like they have a long list of like specific steps that they wanted addressed, and Glossier like kind of sort of answered to some of them, but not really all. They're very like vague terms, which I get. It's like, as a company, I understand it's I don't know, it's not hard to say you're going to do a thing. It's hard to do the thing, so they don't want to say that they're going to. That I understand that's what's happening. So basically, they're just being vague because they're not necessarily going to follow through on everything that they say. But it was just, it's kind of interesting to see this happen to Glossier, since they're kind of like, they're like the big or one of the big brands right now, and their whole thing is championing diversity and inclusivity and all that. But some of the stuff that the beauty editors had said that had happened was just like mind-blowingly unfortunate, and I don't know, kind of a bummer. I really like Glossier, and I hope that they address it. But it's kind of fun. What was funny is that so Glossier is owned by a larger company called Into the Gloss, which is a blog. It's like a beauty blog. And the people who came together to like create this post and the demands and everything, their account is called Out of the Gloss. And it was confusing at first when I saw their account, because they posted their demands and everything with Glossier branding. So when I first saw it, I was like, oh, is Glossier trying to like cancel themselves in an attempt to like appear more woke, so they can, like, I don't know, performatively say you're gonna fix things or something? That's what I thought it was at first. And I don't know. It's kind of interesting. I would be curious to see what you think about it. Some of it does come off as a little bit like calculated, but that might, I mean, they might just have professional PR people involved on both sides. I don't really know.
That is sort of what you're talking about with this. Reminds me a lot of every time somebody who has some amount of like credibility in a certain place or like power has somebody who they've wronged in some way, which if you have a lot of money and or power, you've wronged people. And whenever people who you think are below you make demands, it's always met with that, like, we're not going to do that, because that's how people act towards that. Like if I had a I don't know. I think it is a psychological thing more than it is anything else, but I also think that it's something we need to get over, because, like, if we're going to live in a fucking society, we need to be able to do that. The Bon Appetit thing is kind of similar to that. They're like I think the head of their company, who would like show up in their videos sometimes as like, hey, I forget his name. It's like Kurt or something weird like that. Something basic. He was just a tall white man who would show up in like this kitchen that they all worked in, and he would, you know, it felt very like the way wrestling has like the people who own parts of wrestling just show up and talk to people, that kind of shit. And he got accused of like when COVID stuff started, they all sort of broke out into doing videos in their own kitchens, and then they had like editors who were putting it together to make like videos for stuff. And I think honestly it's because I should rephrase what I said earlier. People who are comfortable being given demands that will make them less comfortable is what bothers people. Because that actually applies to stuff I'm going to talk about in a minute. But the issues, I think, were like they were giving higher wages and more time to white people, like, because they knew that they were like getting a lot of views, and they were just ignoring and they were built on like this idea of like, we're going to show all different kinds of food, all different kinds of people, all this stuff. Like they have I think an Indian cook and a native cook, and like they basically had the like, we have like one of everything, and then like 4 or 5 white people because we're still American. And it seemed very inclusive, just from like a hey, these videos are up kind of way. And then as soon as I think they all realized that their jobs were not super secure anymore, because like they no longer had an office that they were going to, and they were kind of like, they were just in a position where they were having everything that's going on, and then also they were separate from their work. And then it came out like that there were major pay discrepancies and all that kind of stuff if you weren't like one of the white popular people. Yet those pay discrepancies for being popular were that they were taking those people and pushing them into the front and just keeping all these other people back. And I think the response to that was like the guy who owned it like stepped down, and like it definitely had that period of time where it was just that guy being like, I don't know, I don't think that they have a point, for like I think a couple weeks where people were just getting more and more like, hey, you need to listen to your workers, and then eventually instead of deal with anything, he just kind of left. And as far as I know, their channel barely does anything right now, but like the reason why I know about them is because they had like a series called Claire Makes, in which a lady who does like pastry chef work would make like take like an Oreo and then try to like construct her own version of it, and those would get like,
oh yeah, I've seen that.
yeah, those would get like millions of views and are like giant hits in terms of like online content that was consistent and from a company like that. And then it turns out the way they were like setting stuff up and pushing it, they specifically held that power away from a lot of people. I imagine so they could pay them less, but it's also that thing of like, if you're going to be a sleazy company, you're going to get fucked over, and hopefully that happens to every company that operates like that. But I don't know, that's just what it reminded me of while you were talking about Glossier, because it sounds very similar, the like people having issues within the company and they just ignore it, and then when it actually comes down to like, we're going to change our structure and like downsize and all that kind of stuff, people finally have the option to talk about it. And I think the other point that I was thinking of while you were mentioning that is that you said that it seemed almost like kind of calculated, and I think that there is this weird natural trained in response at least, that when you see people who are underfunded compared to who they're against, like the protesters and the police kind of thing, and you see people who are at a disadvantage and they use tactics that are like more costly and more effective, it is like trained into us to not trust them and to think they're lying, but not necessarily to consider that they're doing the exact same thing and worse on the other side. Like the police keep pulling that shit, and the like Proud Boys and white supremacists keep pulling that shit, where it's like a few of them show up to these marches and they try to say they're like the majority of the country, and they're like carrying guns, they're threatening to shoot people. In like, there's videos of people from like yesterday in like the fucking weekend white supremacy marches we had in a bunch of like different country or in states. I think it was Chicago. There was like shots fired out of a moving car by a guy who was on camera while he did it, and people were like, oh, they're just blanks, and they weren't. It turned out he had shot bullets, just not at anybody, just like shot them into like the street basically to like scare people off. And there's a lot of that kind of stuff where it's like, if people did that in the protests, everybody would descend on that shit and be like talking about how it's a violent, horrible thing. But because it's people who are on the side that are being presented as the right people, nothing happened. That guy wasn't arrested. Nobody looked into it. Nobody gives a shit. And sure, the police might give him a fine later for like discharging a weapon in public if the video gets popular enough, but it's very much that same thing of like, if there are tactics being used and you see those tactics, people have already decided what side should be held more accountable, and it's always the side that is disadvantaged. And that feels very like how that works, where it's like you or I could potentially make a very effective and profitable way of communicating with people online. But because we don't have the funding to make that happen, if we made it successful, people would come to us and ask us how we cheated to make it successful. Like, those are the people who get accused of like having bots and stuff, while the people like major companies who do use bots and like political organizations who use bots to like just have their numbers high, people act like that's fine. Like that is just sort of the way that capitalism has stratified itself, is that if you're not already successful, then you shouldn't be, and people know that and will come after you. So people who are successful, who aren't already rich or something, are always going to be a target for something like that. Anyway, I don't know if that's even what your general insinuation was that it seemed too put on, but I just have been noticing a lot of that in the last few months with the way that like people are being treated.
Yeah, I could definitely see kind of similarities in the thought process there. Like that makes sense. And that kind of was my first response, to just kind of question it. I think also part of it is just my cynical like marketing brain is like, okay, they're just trying to like come off as good. But after reading it, I'm pretty convinced that it is real and an actual like collaboration between either people who were laid off or people who left because of the different experiences that they shared. But yeah, I would encourage people to read it. I think it's interesting to hear the other side of it, just because Glossier does have such a put upon kind of clean, inclusive sort of image. And if they're not putting it into practice in their physical stores, which most people don't even, I mean, like absolutely the majority of Glossier consumers don't or haven't experienced those, because they're they're an online brand. And their stores are usually in places like LA or New York City. So if you're like a lot of other people and don't live in those places, you'll probably never experience their stores or what that culture even feels like. So, yeah.
It feels a tiny bit like a well, no, because I think Lush is much more physical. I was gonna say there is a little bit of like the identity politic bit that it sounds like that Lush does, but I think Lush is all like a kind of store based. I don't think there's a huge online component to that, but I might be wrong.
Yeah, I'd be curious to look into Lush as well, because I've seen people's like videos talking about working at Lush and how it wasn't great, but they do have a very similar kind of like marketing strategy, I think, as Glossier. But yeah,
Lush is weird because it almost has like a Costco strategy where they're just constantly like, "Do you want to see our samples?" And it's worked okay. I had a camping toothpaste from there that was pretty good for a little bit.
I do like their toothpaste. Those are cool. The dry shampoo, I guess that would work if you're like a platinum blonde, but they don't make any, as far as I'm aware, they don't make any dry shampoo for like people with brown hair. So it just looks like you're shoving baby powder onto your scalp. It's not great.
Yeah, I wanted to use dry shampoo for a bit because I barely sweat, but I have like I feel like my hair getting slightly like it's not necessarily super greasy, but it gets enough grease in it to where I could more comfortably shower every other day during like certain chunks of time. But if I don't clean my hair like entirely, like at least every like 48 hours, then it's just fucked. And having a dry shampoo option would be super useful for some of that stuff, especially like when I have to be somewhere else where I don't really have the option of taking a shower, having to take like a sink shower just for no other reason, because I wash my face constantly. The only reason is to keep my hair from looking like shit. And that is not a good enough reason for me to like have to take the time to do all of that.
Do everything. Yeah, there if you've tried Batiste before, they actually have a one for people with dark hair, and I use that.
Okay.
Actually. The only thing with that one is that it is literally spraying like dark powder onto you, so you have to really shield your face or something, or else you will get kind of a weird halo around your hairline of just kind of dirty looking.
I guess I'll just have like a piece of paper and I'll spray around that or something.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of things are easier with just having long hair on top. One of the things that could be easier is that I can pull it up and aim it much better than I could with having to hit everything, because the sides of my head are mostly fine for just kind of like rinsing off lightly with soap. So,
yeah.
And I feel like there was something else I was going to mention, but it's probably not that important. This is important, though.
Yeah, I'm really... you said that you don't sweat, and I think I'm sweating enough for both of us right now.
Yeah, for as hot as I am, I have zero, like, action happening. Like,
I'm very sweaty.
I wish... I live with somebody who sweats profusely 24/7, and it would be the perfect environment for me to like just sweat all the time because nobody would care. And unfortunately, it just doesn't happen. The only place that I sweat is like behind my knees and stuff, where like if I sit wrong, it'll slowly be like damp, but everywhere else is just kind of, I don't know. I don't temperature control well enough. It sucks.
I'm usually cold. Usually I tolerate heat very, very, like, really well, and I almost always would rather be too hot than too cold, but I take all of it back from every time I've ever said that forever, because this is very uncomfortable. And my face is just like sweaty, glistening. I look like a vampire.
I feel like I just am either slightly oily or I get the water stuck on me for a little bit. But it would be nice to be temperature controlled. Like I said, I'm too hot for most of the year, so this is not that different from all the time. Anyway, so over the course of the last week or so, I've been having a conversation, I guess, with people about like, so there was a guy who shot like a kid, I want to say like end of last week. It was neighbors, and one neighbor was black, one neighbor was white. They had like been at each other's houses arguing over the course of like a while, and then something happened, and the black neighbor shot the white neighbor's 5-year-old like in the head from like across the yard or something. So like a murder that is a big deal for like everybody involved. The issue is that places like right-wing news sources, basically all of them, because it's the perfect story for them, everybody who hears about it, everybody on that spectrum is now saying like, well, this is the real problem. They started up like a Save Child Lives or something, and also Say His Name they're using for that. And a piece got posted up by the Daily Wire, which already fuck off. And there was no comment or anything with it. It was just clearly set there like a, hey, see? And so I read it. I I have a lot of articles that I have to read in incognito mode lately because I don't want that shit constantly popping up. But I responded to it because that's like, it's the most disingenuous way to cover something like that, where it's trying to first off co-opt a civil rights movement into a white rights movement directly. Like it is just motivated by racism. And like people made the point that like this murder is sort of being exploited, but then of course other people came in with like, well, you're exploiting George Floyd, which is like not at all the same situation. One person was murdered by a cop, and those people are being very lightly at this point held accountable to anything, while tons of other people are having the same treatment still and not being held accountable at all. And then there's this other person who murdered a kid who is in custody as soon as it happens and going to stand trial very soon. Like, it's the most, like, not the same. Like, if you weren't already convinced that black people were dangerous and white people were better, you would look at that story and be like, that sucks, but also don't attach this stuff to it. But instead, I'm just seeing tons of older white people and right-wing news stuff take this idea of like, well, now we see the real problem and it's violent black people, which is like, you've been saying that since we brought slaves here in the first place. Like, it's not that. That isn't true. That's just sort of your weird racist rhetoric. And trying to talk to people about that is already kind of like, it makes me flustered. Like, I don't like that people still don't get that and are older than me and like should know better. And so I responded to that, and then I had 3 people show up to tell me why I was wrong. And then I responded to them because, well, number one, and I'll always say this for this stuff, because I'm an idiot. But a big part of responding to that stuff for me is learning why are people responding to this idea like this when they should know better, and trying to get more of their personal opinion on it. Because I do think the one part of centrism that I think is based on something true is that you have to understand the person that you're talking to best deal with what they're saying. The part that I disagree with is everything else, including working with them in the way that like centrists actually work with the right. So like, thankfully, after doing this for as long as I've done it, I don't care about the response the same way. Like, I will take it as like what I'm trying to learn, and then I will respond to it to see how does that response come back. And the responses with this have been especially like on the edge of like, why even bother to a certain degree. Like, that's always how it feels, but they did reveal a few things that I think are important that I had stopped thinking about. One of them is, and everybody should be aware of this, since like 1990, like early 90s, violent crime in the US has gone down like consistently. Like, not only do we have like the lowest violent crime rates that we've ever had, but it's gone down consistently for like my entire lifetime. And for at least half of most people's entire lifetime, it's been going downward pretty considerably too. And one of the responses I got back was about how defunding police is so dangerous because violent crime has been on the rise for a long time now. And apparently, and I knew that this was a talking point, but like I hadn't really thought about it for like years. The right wing talking point of violent crime being on the rise has just consistently been a thing. Like it completely ignores all of the statistics that our government keeps.
Right.
Like everything that we do, it's really similar to um like our violence in this country also had weird plateaus and stuff in the past, and much like autism with the fucking vaxxer people, the way that information is gathered and the way that like we treat actual things like that, by becoming slowly more progressive as a country consistently throughout like our country existing, except for when white supremacists take over for chunks of time, which I mean is all the time, but I mean like take over in terms of like making policy actively for the entire country. Uh, Things like autism, people say spiked in the last couple decades, but we found a ton of different ways that we could actually identify autism, and it coincides with like a lot of people remember a point in their life where like using the word retard stopped being a thing. Uh, the reason for that, much like the F word for gay people and things along those lines, is that people start actually like in the science community and in like just the community at large start looking at that information as like a real piece of data instead of looking at it like it's just whatever. Our idea of what autism was changed drastically in our lifetime. So our identification of what autistic is in people changed drastically. It's similar to a lot of things in those ranges. Like cancer has been a problem forever, but dying of old age used to look like the same thing. So like we had people dying of old age all the time, and now everybody's polluted. But actually, like there are some aspects of things like that, much like there could be some aspects of like the way we handle lead or the way we handle like different plastics that maybe they raise instances of autism and stuff. Like that's why we have constant study on this. But the way that we could identify it and the different like factors we could start seeing with our advancement is why those numbers went way up. It's the same shit with like how the sunshine laws in Florida drastically alter their already sort of high crime rates to make it look like it's a fucking nightmare to live there, and influences the like pressure for like elderly people in Florida to make these like tight knit, super white communities to keep all of the people out. Because, like, in a lot of ways, these laws not intended to cause fear do, because people are honestly kind of too stupid to just like look at the fact that our advancement also means we're able to identify more stuff. Anyway, so that's a not quite brief enough explanation of like where I think that comes from and where I think a lot of the fear that drives people who are sort of at least somewhat unwittingly going along with like the right-wing talking points of we need to protect our families and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Not to mention Christianity in this country is also run like a business and has been pushing the idea of the family being the important thing to crush the rights of all other people for a long time. And that's been around the world. Like all of that stuff that is treated as, well, these are morals, is a really fun way of couching your like cisgender and white supremacy together to make a really hard to penetrate shell for like people who are comfortable to just say no thank you. Like it's incredibly effective to the point where you do get people who are white supremacists who aren't white, because you get things that are messaging so effectively and ferociously that like that's just where they think reality sits.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be really hard to see through that. But responsibly speaking, it shouldn't be something you ignore to the point where you can't. That's also kind of important. Like, we can only blame the government and people who are trying to push those narratives so much. And that's why I still get kind of frustrated with assholes who refuse to do that. And
Yeah.
the weird, so talking to these exclusively older white women and eventually coming to the like sort of conversation stopping point of them trying to use them
Piss
trying
break.
to use um like essentially caring for other people and having empathy as a weapon. And this is the sort of thing that led me towards like, well, this conversation isn't going to go much further, but
Yeah.
I do have something that I can look into now. They started telling me that it was condescending to talk to them about any of these issues because they were women and I would never understand what that was like, which like is sort of a perfect straw man of like, you're right. I can't understand what that's like, much in the same way that like you can't understand what it's like to be black. I didn't say that because it's not going to lead anywhere. It's just going to lead somewhere racist for them. But having a perspective on things is different from having a desire to have a better world. And I actually wanted to start this off by asking you about like, and keeping in mind, I could be wrong about this. I recognize that like the way stuff works does not center around the way I think about things. But the question I was going to ask is, does being like a white woman specifically, not that it matters too much, but that these are all like white women coming from that level of privilege. But does being a woman put you above criticism of bigotry in any sense? I'm honestly curious like, if it does, where, or like, because like there's a lot of messaging around like the Black Lives Movement of like letting black people lead. But for me, that makes total sense because they're the ones who are most at risk. Is there an aspect of that for women who are either white or passively white, who have the privilege of white people, to lead in place of like white people as a whole? Like, is there is there an exclusionary aspect of that that is helpful? Because for me, just to explain my position, I I've moved to, I originally was saying like I don't think men should have position in office for a while, like a decade or something, so that we can normalize a bit, because people forget that like men are 50% or slightly less of our population.
Mm-hmm.
And people treat it like men are our population and women are an aspect of it, which is incredibly unsettling, but like very true. I personally, I've moved further away from that, and I don't think white people should be in control for a little while. But excluding that sense of like how things in my head would be perfect or an idyllic like decade plan, I'm curious how you feel about like uh, women and discussing the politics of bigotry, especially in reference to like with white men, and how that affects that conversation in general. It's sort of a weird
Mm,
question, but
okay. That is interesting. So, if I'm understanding your question correctly, you're wondering if they are kind of not above reproach, but that they have a unique kind of authority on that space. Is that kind of, or if they should, is that what you're asking?
Maybe, do you think women, I think that it's probably true that women in general have a more experienced perspective on bigotry because they're going to be in a position of being disadvantaged compared to men.
Right.
I guess my actual question would be, if you are talking about racial bigotry, does that apply to the same, like, is it a more important perspective coming from women that are white than men that are white in the world of trying to fix some form of like bigotry like that?
Oh, okay.
It
I
doesn't
don't
have to
know.
be it doesn't have to
That's
be a sure idea, but that's sort of
yeah.
where I'm stuck with it.
I I don't. I mean, I don't know because there because like white and white passing women might have more insight into similar feelings and like similar experiences dealing with that, but also there's a lot of like internalized misogyny that happens that makes it impossible for a lot of women to even really understand that experience. So
Right.
I don't really know. I personally I don't think I would value uh one one person's experience over another if both of the people are white
Mm-hmm.
or white passing. Personally, I don't think that one person would have any more insight into that experience between like a woman and a man. Like to me, I don't think that makes any difference or any real tangible difference. I don't know. It's an interesting question, um, but I mean, generally, I think I would say no. I don't think so, and that might just be because I'm surrounded by a lot of racist white women,
Right.
and I just don't feel like uh, I think the privilege of being white really, even as a woman, really protects you from um, experiencing anything close. So I don't know. That's a hard question, but yeah, I don't think I would say I would value one over another in that situation. But we're in your situation, were they saying that because I'm a woman and I'm a mother, I have more like experience? I like what was the argument from them?
That's, yeah. I mean, so I wanted to ask that with as little context as possible, which is why it was hard to do.
Okay.
uh, it's also just
I might change my opinion. I don't know.
I don't think there is an answer. Like, granted, like taking my opinion out of an opinion that I could really call right or wrong, I think that, like most things, it has to be so case by case with everything that
Right.
it sucks that the specifically the white genocide racist like through line has taken the word discernment and turned it into a code word for you understand what good people look like. Like that is a thing that has happened in the last decade. Um, but I
Yeah.
think that what the word discernment truly means is sort of important for what our conversation about and I mean, for all I know, that's why they use it so much, but having like having your actions, I guess, show what you intend, and leaving it up to people who are actually disadvantaged to decide seems like the right path to me. But I honestly don't know. I don't think that's a question I can answer with any kind of definitiveness. But the context for this is I was told that it was, and I've been told this a couple times by people in that specific group of, people who watch Fox News and The Blaze and kind of live by that. And they're not entirely insane. Like, I understand that they are people who are like parts of a society themselves. And I know that they
Mm.
have lives that have left them with friends, so they must be either more racist than I thought, which I don't think that's true, or just like there's a lot of people who honestly don't know the answer to that question either. Um, but uh, a few of the people from that same group have told me at this point that, including how this conversation got sort of not ended, but got like diverted away from the point, was that my being a white male meant that it was condescending to infer to them that they should have empathy for people who are disadvantaged. Uh, my personal feeling on it is that just because they are from a group that is disadvantaged from the group that I'm in when it comes to gender and color, gender specifically, but when it comes to gender, they're disadvantaged in like, and keeping in mind, a very rich person and a very poor person can balance those scales in different ways as well, but that's not the conversation.
Right.
I know that these people, because of a history where words like discernment could be useful, I know that they own houses, they own several businesses, they have lives where they are worried about property tax, not lives where they're worried about paying rent next month and being able to eat. So on that end, I
Mm-hmm.
have little to no sympathy for them as themselves. They've also told me that basically any group that stands up for the proletariat as an idea is wrong, and that landlords, business leaders, rich people in general, and politicians they agree with are the actual correct thing to go with. So I don't have respect for them and their opinions, but it did, like, that does throw me enough that it's something that I thought about on and off anyway, but I honestly, uh, it comes up a lot in my life. I do have a certain amount of race blindness when it comes to white people. I really don't care about the plight of white people in the same way that I care about other people, because I feel like every time I get to know somebody, it is all of the things that are not the fact that they are white that have impact on their life. And whiteness is a non-factor in a lot of that. So like, I just don't give a shit about their problems in regards to that. And I think
Mm-hmm.
that some part of that makes it more effective for me to hear that, like, well, we've lived lives of fear as women, so we understand empathy. I think that doesn't apply to these specific people the same way they want it to, but I think that it does bring up something that I think I agree with, but I also don't appreciate, like, I'm almost more upset that they're using that as a card to try and lead the conversation away from protecting people who
Yeah.
are legitimately, like, I don't think anybody could make a solid case that white women are more disadvantaged than black men, because consistently throughout American history, black men have been murdered for interacting with white women. I think that takes that off the table. So I really
Yeah.
don't care. about that argument, but I definitely don't want to end up in this place where I'm like condemning white women as a whole because I think that they're using like these strategies of like leading people away from a conversation of they also have a huge amount of privilege despite the fact that they're shit on by white men constantly. I think that is a conversation, in my perspective at least, about religion and about our government and how it's run and about our incredibly chauvinistic leanings when it comes to like how society works. Listen to the fucking Promise Keepers episode of The Dollop that went up recently. That's a really good example of like the Promise Keepers tiny summary. Promise Keepers, if you don't know who they are a men-centric religious group whose entire ideology is that they should give back to women by being subservient, but they're not at all. That's their through line, is that by being the head of the household and making all the decisions, they are taking all the stress away from women and in place becoming more women friendly to a religious society that they want to encourage. It's a really good example of how arguments of gender can turn into the same male supremacy, white power shit if you don't actually pay attention.
Yeah.
Because they make a point that a lot of people in the Promise Keepers start with the Promise Keepers because of spousal abuse as well. So it also works into this weird through line of like many people who commit spousal abuse just sort of get away with it because they aren't always mean. And there's an aspect of something like the Promise Keepers that is taking a group of people who are doing a lot of damage and just make them more aware of the fact that they can just try and fix it by like buying people flowers and shit. I don't know. Anyway, I would love to hear anything else in this episode or future episodes about your thoughts on that stuff, because I honestly, it is impossible for me to know on a lot of it.
I mean, specifically in that situation, that seems very transparently to me just a way to detract from the conversation. I don't think that person would ever really recognize that. I feel like the fact that they are bringing, I don't understand exactly what her or what their argument is. Because two things can be true. Like there can be a problem with that, and then also the way that you're treated. Like this doesn't really detract from the other. So I feel like that's just them purposefully misunderstanding the argument to like distract from the point. And honestly, that tells me that the fact that they're seeing that brought up as a problem and seeing that as an attack on their issues and like infringing upon their space and like detracting from the importance of the problems that they face, whatever those are, that kind of tells me that they're probably a little bit racist too, because like I don't know.
Yeah, and I think that a lot of their other actions at least support that they're a bit racist. It bothers me that that comes up in a conversation about race because false equivalencies are very easy for things like that to just sort of say my point's right. But I think it is honestly just my general agreement that women need more respect and men need less really does play into like I'm a little confused on it, but I don't know. I would love actually It's this week's podcast at gmail.com, all one word at gmail.com. I would like anybody's opinion, male or female, any age, on that stuff if you want to give it. Because I think there's a less important conversation there than the immediate conversation of should we have police that murder black people constantly. I think that's still the conversation we need to stick to for now. But I think gender equity is incredibly important once we can get there without people saying it's not time for that. It's been time for that for a long time too. You could say it's been time for that for thousands of years, but
one could say. But
yeah.
As your Facebook people, I'm assuming this is on Facebook. As the Facebook people,
all the worst people are on Facebook.
As they seem to think, we can only really address or have space in our heads for one issue at a time. So,
and that one issue seems to be white genocide, even if they don't know that's what they're parroting, which is a real bummer.
That is real upsetting.
Anyway, I wanted to bring that up because, and I don't want us to run too long, because I don't want to split our episodes into two pieces if we can help it. But
it's time for a mist.
Yeah, I'm gonna need to wet it up a little bit for this one.
I need to moisten the air.
This is the only kind of sweat equity I believe in. So, granted, that's a larger idea that we're not really equipped to have a giant informed discussion on. The reason why it was important to my week is because I started thinking about deflection, and I started thinking about women's rights a lot after that. And the only thing, like, naturally, my drive was to connect it to something that matters right now. And the thing that does matter right now is trans rights. That is, Black trans people in this country are like the most shit on people that we have. And you can even see it in, like, if you're unfamiliar with the way that that conversation goes in our country, look at the giant insult that the quotations are implicit, that the right wing levied against Michelle Obama while the Obamas were in office. They didn't focus on the being an administration that murdered civilians with knife missiles constantly in the Middle East. That stuff the right wing agrees with, so they stayed away from it. What they focused on was birtherism, which has already come up with Kamala Harris, which is a fucking ridiculous trash fire. And I'm actually not talking about Kamala Harris. I'm talking about the birtherism. Kamala Harris and Obama are probably similarly bad, but Kamala Harris likes the cops even more, I think. So that aside, they had a through line and still do. It still comes up every week that Michelle Obama is a trans woman and that her actual name is Michael and all this garbage. And they point to, like, all of her physical features as evidence for this. It is, on its face, it is just people giving shit to people in power, which is why I think they defend it. In reality, it is a really dangerous through line of people treating trans people like they're not legitimate. And for people who don't know or don't read about the Weimar Republic prior to the rise of the Nazi regime, one of the major things that influenced the Nazis, other than the United States and their treatment of the Native Americans and the black people, is that they had a peaceful and relatively well like rights-oriented rise of transgenderism in the Weimar Republic. So like they were starting to get credibility, which much like a lot of our how do we gauge how quickly this phenomenon is happening, a lot of things like gay people in general, like the queer community, things like that are constantly talked about like it's on the rise. Those things have always been around. There have always been gay people. It is a different side of diagnosis, but it's acceptance that allows you to see those people, because without acceptance, they are, like the F word suggests, burned at the stake. Like, those people are not treated like people, and when you're treated like a scourge on society, you don't ever come out with it. There is a long history of acceptance of those people leading to giant rises in them, which is to say they feel safe enough to actually come out and say who they are. And if you're not paying attention to their community during this whole problem, you should be, because they have actual perspective on this stuff. Like, there's been speeches by Black trans women for the protests and stuff that are by far the most reasonable speeches out there, because they are literally the most disadvantaged of the people we have. But that acceptance, just as sort of a general idea, is what gave... it is essentially, you wait for the thing that people are the most afraid of. One of those things, for whatever fucking reason, is transgenderism. And I think it's largely because, like all other forms of like queer people and stuff like that, it denotes a sense that maybe your feelings of a religious version of life are threatened. And even though a lot of people aren't like super practicing Christian, there is a definite fear of these like warning signs of like the collapse of society being there, which are in fact the signs that we are becoming a more empathetic and legitimate society, but nobody wants to treat it that way. Anyway, that put aside, kind of, there is a movement that has been around for quite a while that is now referred to as the TERFs. I bring that up partially with the Harry Potter stuff because there's a big argument about J.K. Rowling being a TERF, and it actually exposed a lot more people when she started tweeting about, like, well, real women have periods, or menstruation, I think is the word she used, in which people and communities that understood what that means said, hey, fuck you. And people who don't think about it said, like, what do you mean? Of course real women have menstruation. And it's like, sure, you haven't had that conversation with somebody for whatever reason, but like the real quality of this statement is very damaging to a group of people who have been trying to get like real human rights for a very long time and are consistently pushed down. And the term TERF, I think, is thrown around a lot now, but I don't think a lot of people know what it means. So I wanted to just sort of go over that real quick. So TERF is TERF, and it's usually all capital, and it stands for Trans Exclusionary Radical Feminism. And much like a lot of other ideas, they couch their exclusionary tactics within the idea of something like feminism that's trying to gain rights. A lot like religious movements will use the idea of family, which is appealing to a lot of people as a man, a woman, and children, to also push things like segregation, push things like anti-queer messaging, stuff like that. That's what the TERFs are all about. And by using the term radical feminism, which is what they call themselves usually as just radical feminists, they can adhere themselves to a movement that is trying to find women's rights, when in fact, they are specifically trying to take away the rights or further restrict people who are trans. It's where things like the bathroom ban stuff came from. That was TERF movement, because otherwise, who would give a shit? But of course, people have to come out and start saying, like, well, it's to protect our children, which is the Christian family values thing, and it's to protect our women, which is the feminism thing. And those two things are both wrong, but like as ideas, they're both fine. I'm losing faith that being Christian is fine on like a daily basis, but I want to keep that because I know a lot of Christians. I'm related to a lot of Christians, but eventually I think it kind of needs to go away. It is very outdated. Anyway, so let's see. I want to read a couple of quotes to give people an idea of what being a TERF and their rationalization looks like. But
are we just gonna hop on Twitter and look through what's her face's feed?
I'm not, no. But I do want to give people a website. So there is an informational website up that's just called The TERFs. So THETR or THETERFS.com. And it looks like this. But it is basically just a informational scroll that gives you it gives you their positions politically. It gives you quotes from notable people who are identified as that group, and it gives you like reasons why you need to think about things a little harder. For example, it talks about violence motivated by TERF ideology. It talks about their specific political actions against people from like the Stonewall riots. It talks about how long they've been around, which is a long ass time. They just started getting called TERFs as a more like we can identify them kind of thing in recent years. So one of the things that I think is worth talking about, yeah, God, the best thing you're going to do is probably, they're all bad. The best thing you can do is go to theterfs.com. You don't have to read all of it. I think you'll get the idea pretty quickly, but if you do read all of it, you're going to have a pretty good perspective on the fact that it is a pretty huge amount of people who believe this shit. It even goes over things like people trying to devalue the term TERF to try and say that it's a like scare tactic to keep people from thinking about like the evils that trans people actually do. Like there's all kinds of crazy shit. So I think more useful, I'm just going to go over their positions on things because these are well known, and especially in the UK, they are very active as like a group that influenced the conservative, the caring conservative groups, which, yeah, that's kind of why they have the freedom to do this stuff so easily, is because they can align themselves with groups that are typically like, oh, they would never be for women's rights, but instead they're like, no, we're for women's rights, and instead they're actually against trans rights and don't really give a shit about women's rights. While I read these, just to like plant it in your mind a little bit, maybe think about the writer of Harry Potter agreeing with all of this, because she does, and that's fun. So the TERF position on trans healthcare. In the 1980s, TERF substantively supported the effort to bring an end to trans healthcare access. One TERF operative wrote a government report which led the revocation of public and private insurance coverage of trans medical care. According to the state of California, such policies lead to the death of trans people. So there is a lot of push towards things like declaring operations for trans people as elective to keep them away from getting support for any of that. There's issues with things like pre-existing conditions where if you live in an area where somebody wants to make an excuse, they can just say that they don't need to help you with any of your issues because that's not their problem. There's a lot of sort of hidden bits to our already terrible medical system that specifically is designed to keep healthcare away from trans people. When it comes to trans equality, for decades, TERFs have sought to legislate trans people out of existence. You might remember during Trump's second year, I want to say, they tried to say that trans people were not a group. They tried to say that there were men and women and that you could add an extra label to them for something else, but trans people didn't get to be a gender because there's only two. That is an argument within the last couple of years in this country that our own president was pushing. So you can find examples of that very easily. Moreover, they work to oppose trans equality measures, infiltrate trans-inclusive feminist spaces, work with anti-gay groups to target trans kids, and collaborate with trans extremists who advocate bombing U.S. targets. So there's a lot of like what they do with the protests, essentially pull out all of the people who they can take as bad examples. Let's say a black man kills a white kid. You turn that into a story of, look how dangerous they are. So there's a lot of like, let's point at this one trans person who said they wanted to bomb, who cares, the White House, I don't know. And like, I'm sure in my lifetime I've said I want to bomb the White House. Who gives a shit? But if you take people like that and put them up, people will listen because people don't like trans people. If you take, let's say, me and say, I want to do that, especially if you don't have the knowledge of me being pro-socialist, if you just see a white guy, your initial reaction is going to be like, did he though? And I think that's important to remember. The TERF position on trans restroom access, much like their far right-wing counterparts, TERFs do not support trans people using restrooms. In fact, the TERF community was the first to use this as a political issue in '73. So that whole bathroom thing of like, well, there's going to be rapes everywhere, not considering that the trans issue is getting to use the right restroom, considering that other people might be uncomfortable. Again, discomfort is how we push all the wrong ideas. We're all going to be uncomfortable fixing the environment. We need to fucking shut up and do it. And I think, honestly, as a poorer person who doesn't get shit on for like my skin color or gender, it is extremely obvious to me when it comes to things like environmentalism, because in the world of dangers to me, it's like my medical needs that I can't meet and the environment. And then like the rest of it, I'll figure out, because I can walk out on the street and be like, something's wrong with me, and people will actually talk to me, you know? Discomfort is kind of necessary for a lot of this stuff. And hopefully our shitty old grandparents and parents, of course I'm being non-specific, they can all get used to that idea and stop complaining about how they were less comfortable once and thinking that that's actually an excuse for anything. Especially if you look at the baby boomer like lifestyle and history of our actual country, they can fuck right off. On body autonomy, much like their extremist counterparts, TERF generally do not recognize the transition status of trans people and instead assert that trans people are the sex they were assigned at birth, which, again, that's something that our own government constantly stresses. It's not like at all the ethical way to treat people. You need to. It's like saying that you didn't have a gun at birth, so you're not allowed to own them. Like, if you want to get something stupid out there to, like, counter it, nothing when you're born matters except for what other people say. So until you have autonomy, why would you even say that you made a decision? You exist. That is a strictly religious view, and we need to stop pushing it on everybody else.
Yeah.
Anyway, I read through a lot of this the other night. There is an amazing amount of very accepted violence against trans people. There's been public beatings of them like this year. There's all kinds of shit that people just look at and say, I mean, that's just pointing to one person, but it's not. Trans people are killed at a rate or also commit suicide at a rate that's above everyone else.
Yeah, I think I don't know if this is for Black trans people, but I think the life expectancy for trans people is like 35 or something.
Yeah.
Insanely low.
Like, they've literally been left out of modern society, period.
Yeah,
like,
I mean, imagine if the life expectancy for literally anybody else was 35. Like, that wouldn't...
Our president would be trying to call that a shithole country or some stupid shit like that. Like, the fact that exists and that because of the nature of things like being trans, there is a tendency to greatly underestimate how many people associate with that identity than what is actually recorded, because you're literally in danger if you say you are. And
yeah,
I don't know. I just think it's really important to remember that some people who say that they are feminist need to be looked at more closely. Some people who say that they're religious need to be looked at more closely. Like, you need to have actual empathy for people. You can't just say you're a part of a group that has empathy. Otherwise, there would be absolutely no way that they could make Black Lives Matter look bad. Like, people who are disingenuous about this stuff know it's true already. They just don't want to use the same logic that they try to push on everyone else for their own stupid shit. Anyway,
I think especially for feminists or like radical feminists that you see like on Twitter and stuff, anyone that spends any amount of time policing what it means to be a woman or creating any sort of like, I don't know, just being exclusionary about that is not a good person.
Yeah, I might not be female, but I do understand that gatekeeping more people from even being able to say that they are female is pretty fucking bullshit.
Also, if you're a radical feminist, you have bigger fish to fry than who identifies as a woman.
Yeah, if you're really radical feminist, do your fucking job. Like,
yeah, we have bigger issues. Such as picking which rapist we would like for our president.
It is a real bummer seeing the amount of like Biden support wants to minimize that in the process. If I could have any still possible wish for this coming election, it would be that people would just finally be like, look, they're both misogynist, racist fucks, and we have to pick the one that's not going to kill us for certain. Like, that's
the one that we kind of maybe have a chance with. Yeah.
I also just want to touch real quick because I think that happened at the start of the week. I don't think this was on the last episode, but AOC got like 72% of the total votes, or more than that, maybe, in her run. And places that are usually middle of the road or even sometimes slightly liberal were even saying that she barely squeaked by her win and that everybody else better watch out if they're progressive kind of shit. And it's like, that kind of messaging sucks so hard. Like every time, I think in the same way you could apply disadvantaged people who are really trying for something to a lot of things, people love to diminish the accomplishments of people who are actually trying to change anything. All of this is stupid.
I agree. It's dangerous to trust this 100% of the time, but more and more I find myself more interested in reading real people's comments and thoughts and discussions about what is happening than some asshats article from whatever newspaper. I don't know, especially now, like after all the protests and everything, and how people use the power of like being able to have the video of those things and actually kind of unofficially report what was happening. Like, I think that's really important and really cool to be able to have access to that. But obviously, it's not always, correct. But
I mean, if you want actual protest information, like check out Seattle Protest News, Rose City Warfare, Gunpowder Press, places like that. All of those places, you don't even have to read their reporting. They're putting videos up like on a multiples of each day. They're putting videos up that are just showing what's happening with the protests in those cities at the time. I still say it was a huge deal that actual news places went to report on Portland, but the fact that Portland seems like it's over to a lot of people is crazy. And people aren't paying attention to Chicago, Seattle, like all of these other, like literally tons of cities, like hundreds of cities are having these things just in the US every single day. Like Seattle has like 3 protests a day, and usually at least one of them is involved with serious police brutality to the people protesting, and people are acting like it's not even happening. I don't know. Not that that's going to change between now and next podcast. It's just, please remember that protests are happening, and if you care and you're able, you should go protest. I also saw stuff about in that conversation about how they don't care about spreading the virus in protests. Like, I trust news articles for a lot of stats mostly, and one of those, if they have real stats, like, I will at least look at that stuff. And there's been quite a few articles at this point talking about how protesters wearing masks, practicing distancing, has led to a very tiny amount of COVID like problems. And I know for a fact, because I talked to a fair amount of different groups around Seattle, that they practice quarantine stuff. Like, they are oftentimes rotating people in and out, even. Like, people go protest for a week and then not for like a couple weeks. A lot of those people are being very cautious, and it helps that wearing a mask means you're less likely to get abducted by our fucking police. So that's a good incentive. But people who are telling you that it's spreading the virus and it's not fucking house parties and schools and stuff now are just being disingenuous or stupid. But either way.
I don't want to hear it. As long as we have actual anti-mask protests still happening, shut up. Just don't even. That's stupid.
Yeah, if you see a protester video of guys with guns almost always with like at least one non-white person in the perimeter of that group, and none of them are wearing masks, you can almost guarantee that if you look close enough, there are Trump stickers on their shit, and they are from this last weekend's fucking white power marches, which, if you weren't aware, happened over the course of this weekend in a bunch of cities as well. It is very frustrating seeing people conflate like shitty people with guns not wearing masks with protesting police violence, because it's not fucking happening. The police even started wearing masks because of the protests, because first off, the protesters were complaining, but also the police looked so bad not wearing masks when all the protesters were, that it guilted them into wearing them just so they would not look like the bad guy and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's insane to say that the protests are causing any of that shit. Like, obviously, it's still a group of people, so, like, it's gonna happen, but the fucking cowards out there who are trying to pin it on them are just wrong.
Yeah. And I would love to see any of the same outrage for all the other people. Yeah. The white power protests and the anti-mask protests.
The anti-mask protests from a few months ago, where they were screaming in police officers' faces from like an inch away, and not only did the police not care at all, they also didn't have any problem with them not wearing masks, like, and holding assault weapons while yelling at the police. That's all fine.
Weird how they don't fear for their lives when it's white people holding them. Also, I'd love to say that those were a month ago, but they're still happening here. So.
Oh no, they're happening all over the place. But those videos were specifically videos I'm referencing from like 4 months ago now or whatever, when they were like they occupied the Kentucky like, I think it was Kentucky City Hall. And they acted like, oh, look how well they're working with everybody. And it was a literal armed takeover. And then people did a sit-in in the Seattle City Hall. And people said that Seattle was over and the Antifa terrorists had taken it over. Like, the messaging is so whack on that shit. Well, do you have a song to take us out on?
I don't. I'll try.
Here, I can back
I'll make
you up
an attempt.
I'll just do a little rhythm.
Okay. Oh my god. My nails are too long. And I should have cut them. But I didn't. Hopefully my ukulele's okay. Thanks for listening to another episode of this week's podcast. Oh, and we have an email. If you want to respond to any of the stuff that we talked about.
Email.
Which is, it's thisweekspodcast@gmail.com altogether. We also have an Instagram. And the handle for that is at Vegeta42069.
Nice.
Easy to remember. Even though I messed it up last time.
Thanks for coming. Don't be a turf. Get wet.
Oh. Episode named. All right. Why am I forgetting the thing that I always say? The heat is like getting to me. I'm like,
Yeah, I'm all bejabbers.
Okay. Goodbye. I know it's something to that effect.
All right, get out of here, thoughts.
Thank you. I know I was gonna say get out whores, but I know it's not get out whores.
Goodbye, cowards.